Have you ever felt invisible in a room full of people who once knew you? That's exactly where our story begins today. Before we dive in, if you're enjoying these real-life stories of redemption and unexpected romance, hit that like button and subscribe to see more content that touches your heart and reminds you that second chances are always possible. The bass from the speakers vibrated through Mark's chest as he stood awkwardly by the punch bowl, watching his former classmates laugh and mingle. 15 years had passed since high school graduation, but the social hierarchy seemed frozen in time. He tugged at his department store blazer, suddenly aware of how it hung loosely on his frame. He'd lost weight since Sarah left, taking everything but their daughter Emma with her. "Well, look who decided to show up," came a booming voice that made Mark's stomach clench. Trevor Matthews, former football captain and current owner of the town's most successful car dealership, approached with the same swagger he'd had in high school. "The quiet kid who knocked up the prom queen. How's life treating you, buddy?" Mark forced a smile. "I'm doing all right, Trevor." "Just all right?" "Man, Sarah really took you to the cleaners, didn't she? Heard you're living in that tiny apartment over on Maple, working some desk job." Trevor's voice carried, drawing attention from nearby groups. "Must be tough being a nobody again after landing the hottest girl in school." The words stung more than Mark wanted to admit. He'd spent the last 5 years rebuilding his life after Sarah left, working overtime at Horizon Technologies to provide for Emma while juggling school activities and doctor appointments alone. He'd come tonight only because Emma had insisted, "You need friends too, Dad," but now he regretted it. "I should probably head out," Mark mumbled, setting down his untouched punch. "Already? But we haven't even gotten to hear about your exciting life," Trevor pressed, his smile not reaching his eyes. "Tell us, what's it like being the guy who peaked at 18? A few people nearby shifted uncomfortably, but no one intervened. Mark felt heat rising to his face, the familiar sensation of being the outsider, just as he'd been in high school before Sarah had noticed him in senior year. "I think my daughter's waiting for me to call," Mark said quietly, trying to move past Trevor. Trevor stepped into his path. "Your kid's what now, 14? Old enough to realize her dad's a loser?" Mark froze, his hands clenching into fists. He could handle insults about himself, but Emma was off limits. Before he could respond, a clear, authoritative voice cut through the tension. "Don't talk to my man like that." The crowd parted as Alexandra Chen, CEO of Horizon Technologies and Mark's boss, strode toward them. Her midnight blue dress complemented her confident posture, and her eyes were fixed on Trevor with an intensity that made him take a step back. "Your man?" Trevor repeated, looking between Mark and Alexandra in confusion. Mark was equally stunned. Alexandra was not only his boss but one of the most respected businesswomen in the state. They had a professional relationship. She'd promoted him twice in the past year, appreciating his dedication and innovative ideas, but they weren't romantically involved. What was she doing here, and why was she claiming him as her man? Alexandra slipped her arm through Mark's with practiced ease. "Yes, my man. The brilliant systems analyst who just saved our company $2 million with his new efficiency protocol." She turned to Mark with a warm smile that transformed her usually serious face. "Sorry I'm late, darling. The investor call ran long." Mark stared at her, speechless. Alexandra gave his arm a subtle squeeze, her eyes communicating something he couldn't quite decipher. Trevor's confident demeanor faltered. "You're dating the CEO of Horizon Tech. That's unexpected." "Is it?" Alexandra raised an eyebrow. "Mark has always been exceptional. Some people just weren't paying attention." She surveyed Trevor with the same analytical gaze she used in boardroom negotiations. "And you are?" "Trevor Matthews. I own Matthews Motors, the largest dealership in the county." He extended his hand, switching to his salesman charm. Alexandra ignored his hand. "Interesting. We just contracted with AutoNation for our company fleet. I don't believe your dealership was even considered. She turned to Mark. Shall we mingle? I'd love to meet your old friends, the ones worth knowing, anyway. As Alexandra led him away, Mark leaned close to whisper, What are you doing here? Saving you from that jerk, apparently, she murmured back. Emma called me. Emma? How does she even have your number? Alexandra smiled. Remember when you brought her to the office during spring break? We exchanged numbers when she helped me pick out a birthday gift for my niece. She texted me tonight saying you were dreading this reunion but trying to be brave. I thought you might appreciate some backup. Mark was stunned. His daughter and his boss had been texting? And Alexandra had driven across town on a Saturday night just to help him save face? You didn't have to pretend we're together, he said quietly as they reached a quieter corner. Alexandra's expression softened. I know. But the look on that guy's face was worth it. She studied him for a moment. You know, you're one of the most valuable people on my team, Mark. The way you balance being a dedicated father with exceptional work, it's impressive. Don't let people like him make you feel small. For the first time that evening, Mark felt himself relax. Thank you. Not just for coming, but for saying that. I only state facts, she replied with a slight smile. Now, shall we give them something to really talk about? I hear there's dancing in the other room. As they moved toward the dance floor, Mark noticed the curious glances and whispers following them. For once, he didn't mind the attention. Alexandra's hand was warm in his, and her presence beside him felt surprisingly natural. You know this is going to be all over the office by Monday, he said as they began to dance to a slow song. Alexandra laughed, a genuine sound he'd rarely heard at work. Let them talk. Maybe it'll finally stop HR from trying to set me up with every eligible bachelor in the city. They do that? Constantly. Apparently, a single woman in her 30s running a company is something that needs to be fixed. She rolled her eyes. Mark found himself smiling. I know that feeling. The number of neighbors and parents from Emma's school who want to set me up is exhausting. Single dad struggles? Among many, he admitted. But we manage. Emma's amazing, she's the reason I keep going. Alexandra's eyes softened. She talks about you like you're her hero, you know. When she was at the office, all she could talk about was how you taught her to code, how you never miss her soccer games even when you're swamped with work. Mark felt a lump form in his throat. She said that? She did. You're doing a great job, Mark. As a father and as my systems analyst. The song changed to something more upbeat, but they continued swaying slowly, caught in a moment that felt separate from the reunion chaos around them. So, Alexandra said after a comfortable silence, tell me about high school, Mark. Were you really the quiet kid? The quietest, he confirmed with a self-deprecating smile. Until senior year when Sarah, my ex-wife, noticed me in AP Physics. I helped her pass the class, she made me suddenly visible to everyone else. Classic story. And now? Mark considered the question. Now I'm still quiet, but for different reasons. I've learned to listen more, especially to Emma. And I've found my voice in other ways, through my work, through being a dad. Alexandra nodded approvingly. That's what I saw in you when I promoted you. You don't speak unless you have something valuable to say. It's refreshing in a world of people who talk just to hear themselves. As the evening progressed, Mark found himself enjoying the reunion in a way he never expected. With Alexandra by his side, conversations flowed easily. She was charming and sharp, making former classmates who had ignored Mark for years suddenly interested in his life and career. He watched her work the room with the same strategic brilliance she brought to business, and found himself admiring her more with each passing hour. By the time they stepped outside into the cool night air, Mark felt like he'd experienced a different reality, one where he wasn't just the struggling single dad, but someone worthy of attention and respect. Thank you, he said sincerely as they walked to the parking lot. You didn't have to do any of this. Alexandra stopped walking and turned to face him. I wanted to. And not just for Emma's sake. She hesitated, uncharacteristically uncertain. I've noticed you, Mark. Not just your work, but you. The way you bring coffee to Diane in accounting when she's having a rough day. How you stayed late to help the new intern understand the filing system. You think no one sees these things, but I do. Mark felt something shift between them, a boundary blurring, a possibility opening. Would you like to get coffee sometime? He asked before he could overthink it. Not as boss and employee, but just as people. Alexandra's smile was answer enough. I'd like that very much. As they exchanged a tentative goodnight, Mark realized that what had started as one of the most humiliating evenings of his adult life had transformed into something unexpected, a beginning. The following Monday, Mark arrived at work with a mixture of nervousness and anticipation. Would things be awkward with Alexandra now? Had the weekend's pretense changed their professional relationship? He needn't have worried. Alexandra was her usual efficient self in the morning meeting, giving no indication that anything had changed. But as the team dispersed, she caught his eye and gave him a small, private smile that made his heart race. Later that day, his phone buzzed with a text from Emma, Dad. How was the reunion? Did Ms. Chen show up? Did you dance? Tell me everything. Mark smiled, typing back, it was surprising. And yes, we danced. We're getting coffee this weekend. Emma's response was immediate, OMG yes. I knew it. Mark shook his head, wondering when his teenage daughter had become so invested in his love life. But he couldn't deny the warmth spreading through his chest at the thought of seeing Alexandra outside of work. Their coffee date turned into dinner, which turned into weekend hikes with Emma, which evolved into family movie nights and holiday celebrations. Alexandra, who had always prioritized her career over personal relationships, found herself drawn to the genuine connection she felt with both Mark and his daughter. 6 months after the reunion, Mark stood in his kitchen making breakfast while Emma and Alexandra sat at the counter discussing Emma's science project. The domesticity of the scene struck him, how naturally Alexandra had fit into their lives, how much brighter their small apartment seemed with her in it. Dad, Alexandra thinks I should focus my project on renewable energy instead of just solar power, Emma said, showing him her notes. Alexandra is usually right about these things, Mark replied with a smile. Alexandra rolled her eyes. Don't tell her that. I'm still trying to convince her I'm not infallible. Too late, Emma grinned. I already know you're both basically perfect. The easy banter between them filled Mark with a contentment he hadn't felt in years. This was what family was supposed to feel like, supportive, loving, secure. Later that night, after Emma had gone to bed, Mark and Alexandra sat on the balcony of his apartment, looking at the stars. I never thanked you properly, Mark said quietly. For what? For showing up that night. For seeing something in me worth defending. Alexandra took his hand. I should be thanking you. Before you and Emma, my life was all spreadsheets and quarterly reports. I didn't realize how empty it was. Are you saying we're better than spreadsheets? That's high praise coming from you, he teased. She laughed, leaning her head on his shoulder. Slightly better. Don't let it go to your head. As they sat in comfortable silence, Mark reflected on how dramatically his life had changed since that reunion. The humiliation he'd felt under Trevor's scrutiny seemed distant now, replaced by the confidence that came from being truly seen and valued. 1 year after the reunion, Mark found himself back in the same venue, but for a very different occasion. The company holiday party was in full swing, with Horizon Technologies employees filling the decorated hall. Nervous? Emma asked, adjusting her father's tie. At 15, she was growing into a poised young woman, tonight wearing her first formal dress for the occasion. A little, Mark admitted. It's a big step. She's going to say yes, Emma said confidently. She looks at you like you're her favorite person in the world. After you, maybe, Mark smiled, touching the small velvet box in his pocket for reassurance. The evening progressed with dinner and speeches, including Alexandra's annual address to the company. Mark watched her with pride as she spoke about Horizon's accomplishments and future goals, her natural authority commanding the room's attention. And finally, Alexandra said, wrapping up her speech, I want to acknowledge someone who has not only transformed our systems department but has reminded me why we do what we do. Our work isn't just about technology or profit margins, it's about creating connections and improving lives. Her eyes found Mark's in the crowd. Mark Anderson, would you join me up here? Surprised, Mark made his way to the stage as curious murmurs spread through the audience. Mark joined our team 6 years ago, Alexandra continued as he reached her side. In that time, he's revolutionized our efficiency protocols, mentored countless new employees, and somehow managed to be an exceptional father while doing it all. He's also changed my life in ways I never expected. She turned to him, her professional demeanor softening. I had a whole speech planned about your contributions to the company, but what I really want to say is thank you. For showing me that success isn't measured in quarterly reports or market share, but in moments of connection and growth. Mark felt the weight of every gaze in the room, but for once, he didn't mind being the center of attention. With Alexandra beside him, he felt confident, valued, visible in all the right ways. What happened next wasn't planned. Mark had intended to propose later that night, in private, but something about the moment felt right. Before he could second-guess himself, he reached for the box in his pocket and dropped to one knee. A collective gasp rose from the audience as Alexandra's hands flew to her mouth in surprise. I had a speech prepared too, Mark said, his voice steady despite his racing heart. About how you walked into that reunion and changed everything. How you saw me when I felt invisible. How you've become not just my partner but Emma's role model and friend. He opened the box, revealing a simple but elegant diamond ring. Alexandra Chen, will you marry me? For a moment, the powerful CEO was speechless, tears gathering in her eyes. Then she nodded, pulling him to his feet. Yes, she said simply, before kissing him as the room erupted in applause. From her table, Emma was cheering the loudest, capturing the moment on her phone with tears streaming down her face. Later, as the celebration continued around them, Alexandra whispered, I can't believe you proposed at the company party. Too public? Mark asked, suddenly worried. She shook her head, smiling. Perfect, actually. Now everyone knows you're officially my man. Mark laughed, remembering her words from the reunion. I've been yours since you walked across that room and stood up for me. And I've been yours since you showed me there's more to life than being the boss, she replied softly. 2 years later, Mark stood in the backyard of their new home, watching as Emma helped Alexandra arrange flowers for the dinner table. They'd moved into the house 6 months after their wedding, a comfortable place with enough room for all three of them plus Alexandra's home office and Mark's workshop. Life had settled into a rhythm that still sometimes amazed him. Emma was thriving in her junior year, already receiving interest from top engineering programs. Mark had been promoted to systems director, leading his own team with the same quiet confidence he'd developed. And Alexandra continued to guide Horizon Technologies to new heights, though she'd also learned to delegate more, creating space for their family life. Dad! Can you help with the grill? Emma called, waving him over. As he joined his family, Mark's phone buzzed with a notification. It was a friend request from Trevor Matthews, with a message, Hey Mark, saw your feature in Business Weekly. Impressive stuff. Would love to catch up sometime. Mark showed the message to Alexandra, who raised an eyebrow. Going to accept? Mark considered it for a moment, then shook his head. No need. I've already got everything I want right here. He put his phone away and turned his attention to the two women who had changed his life, his brilliant daughter who had never lost faith in him, and his remarkable wife who had seen his worth when he'd forgotten it himself. As they gathered around the table, laughing and sharing stories about their day, Mark reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From being the humiliated single dad standing alone at a reunion to building this life full of love and purpose, it had all started with those 7 words that had broken. Through the noise of his past, "Don't talk to my man like that." 5 years after the reunion, Mark found himself back in his hometown for another gathering, this time, Emma's high school graduation. As valedictorian, she stood at the podium delivering a speech that had both Mark and Alexandra wiping away tears of pride. "Success isn't defined by titles or wealth," Emma was saying, her confidence reminiscent of Alexandra's boardroom presence but with Mark's thoughtful delivery. "It's found in resilience, in showing up every day for the people who matter, in building something meaningful from whatever life gives you." Her eyes found Mark in the audience. "My dad taught me that. He showed me that true strength isn't about never falling, it's about how you rise again. And sometimes, rising means allowing others to help you stand." After the ceremony, as they navigated through the crowd of celebrating families, Mark spotted a familiar face. Trevor Matthews approached, older now, his confident stride somewhat diminished. "Mark," Trevor nodded, extending his hand. "Congratulations on your daughter. That was quite a speech." "Thank you," Mark replied, shaking his hand without hesitation. The resentment he might have felt years ago had long since faded, replaced by a calm confidence in his own path. "I heard about your success at Horizon," Trevor continued. "And your marriage. You've done well for yourself." Alexandra joined them, slipping her arm through Mark's with the same natural ease she had that night at the reunion. "Trevor, isn't it? Nice to see you again." If Trevor was surprised she remembered him, he didn't show it. "Likewise. I was just congratulating Mark on Emma's achievement." "She's remarkable," Alexandra agreed. "Takes after her father." Trevor nodded, a flash of something like regret crossing his face. "Listen, I should apologize for how I behaved at the reunion. I was going through some things. The dealership was struggling, my marriage was falling apart. I took it out on you, and that wasn't right." Mark studied the man who had once made him feel so small. "I appreciate that, Trevor. I hope things are better for you now." "Getting there," Trevor said with a tired smile. "Started over in a lot of ways. It's humbling, but necessary sometimes." As they exchanged pleasantries and parted ways, Emma bounded over, still in her graduation gown. "Was that the jerk from the reunion?" she asked, having heard the story many times. "Just someone finding his way, like the rest of us," Mark replied, putting his arm around her shoulders. Emma looked thoughtful. "You know, in my college application essay, I wrote about that night, about how Alexandra stood up for you, and how it changed everything for us." "You did?" Alexandra asked, surprised. Emma nodded. "I wrote about watching two people build something beautiful from an unexpected moment. About how love sometimes finds you when you're just trying to survive." Mark felt his heart swell with emotion. "And now you're off to MIT in the fall. How did we get so lucky?" "I'm the lucky one," Emma said, hugging them both. "Not everyone gets to see their parent find happiness again. It gave me permission to believe in second chances." 10 years after the reunion that had changed everything, Mark and Alexandra hosted a gathering of their own, a celebration of Horizon Technologies' expansion and the launch of their new charitable foundation, focused on supporting single parents pursuing education and career advancement. The foundation had been Mark's idea, born from his own experience and his desire to create pathways for others facing similar challenges. Alexandra had immediately championed it, leveraging her business connections to secure funding and partnerships. As Mark stood addressing the crowd of investors, employees, and grant recipients, he felt none of the anxiety that had once plagued him in public settings. "When I became a single father at 23, I thought my professional dreams were over," he shared openly. I was working entry-level jobs, struggling to make rent, and trying to be everything my daughter needed. What changed my trajectory wasn't just hard work, though there was plenty of that, it was having someone believe in my potential. His eyes found Alexandra in the front row, her proud smile warming him. Sometimes, all it takes is one person saying, "I see you," to transform a life. Through this foundation, we hope to be that voice for others who feel invisible in their struggle. The first cohort of grant recipients included 20 single parents who would receive financial support, mentorship, and flexible employment opportunities within Horizon's network. Mark had personally interviewed each one, recognizing in their stories the same determination and hope that had carried him through his darkest days. After the formal presentations, as guests mingled and networked, Mark found a quiet moment with Alexandra on the venue's terrace. "You know what I was thinking about today?" he asked, taking her hand. "What's that?" "How different my life would be if Emma hadn't texted you that night. If you hadn't shown up at the reunion." Alexandra smiled, the lines around her eyes deepening slightly, evidence of a decade filled with more laughter than stress. "I think we would have found our way to each other eventually. Some connections are inevitable." "Is that the romantic or the CEO talking?" he teased. "Both," she replied confidently. "I had my eye on you long before that reunion, you know. Your systems proposal the month before had impressed me, and I'd noticed how you always stayed late to help the interns. The reunion just gave me an excuse to make a move." Mark laughed. "So you're saying my brilliant daughter wasn't actually your matchmaker?" "Let's give her partial credit," Alexandra compromised. "She recognized what we both needed before we did." As if summoned by their conversation, Emma appeared in the doorway. At 25, she had grown into a poised young woman with Mark's thoughtful nature and Alexandra's determination. After graduating from MIT, she had surprised them both by joining a renewable energy startup instead of coming to work at Horizon. "There you two are," she said, joining them. "The new grant recipients are asking to meet the famous Mark Anderson who designed the program." Mark smiled. "Not famous. Just someone who's been where they are." "Which is exactly why they need to hear from you," Emma insisted. "Your story matters, Dad." As they walked back inside together, Mark reflected on the journey that had brought him here. From the humiliated single father standing alone by the punch bowl to the confident man he was today, husband, father, mentor, director, foundation creator. Each role built upon the others, creating a life richer than he could have imagined. The reunion that had once filled him with dread had become the catalyst for everything good in his life. One moment of public humiliation, transformed by 7 powerful words from a woman who saw his worth when he couldn't see it himself. "Don't talk to my man like that." Words that had broken through years of self-doubt. Words that had reminded him he deserved respect. Words that had begun a love story he never expected. 15 years to the day after that fateful reunion, Mark and Alexandra sat on the porch of their vacation cabin, watching the sunset over the lake. Their annual 2-week retreat had become sacred time, no emails, no meetings, just the two of them reconnecting away from the demands of their busy lives. "Penny for your thoughts," Alexandra said, noticing Mark's contemplative expression. "I was just thinking about time," he replied. 15 years ago today, you walked into that reunion and changed everything." Alexandra smiled, reaching for his hand. "Best impulse decision I ever made. Do you ever wonder about the parallel universe where you didn't show up? Where I left early, humiliated, and we just continued as boss and employee?" "Sometimes," she admitted. "But I prefer this reality." Mark nodded, squeezing her hand. "Me too. Though I still can't believe Emma orchestrated the whole thing." Their daughter, now a successful environmental engineer, had confessed years later that her text to Alexandra hadn't been as innocent as it seemed. "I saw how you looked at each other at the office picnic," she'd explained. "You both just needed a push." "She always was too smart for her own good," Alexandra laughed. "But she was right. We did need that push. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, Mark felt a profound gratitude wash over him. For the woman beside him who had transformed from boss to partner to the love of his life. For his daughter who had believed in his happiness even when he'd forgotten how to seek it. For the journey that had brought him from isolation to connection. "What do you think the next 15 years will bring?" he asked. Alexandra leaned her head on his shoulder, her hand still warm in his. "More of this. More growth. More moments that matter." She turned to look at him, her eyes reflecting the sunset's glow. "More reasons to stand up and say, 'Don't talk to my man like that,' if needed." Mark laughed, pulling her closer. "I haven't needed that protection in a long time." "I know," she said softly. "You found your voice. But I'll always be ready to use mine for you, just as you've done for me countless times." In the quiet of the evening, with the woman who had seen his worth when he couldn't see it himself, Mark understood that the most profound transformations often begin in our most vulnerable moments. His had started with humiliation at a high school reunion, but had blossomed into a life filled with purpose, love, and the quiet confidence that comes from being truly seen. And it had all begun with those 7 words that changed everything: "Don't talk to my man like that." If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more stories of unexpected love, second chances, and the moments that change our lives forever. Remember that sometimes our lowest points can become the foundation for our greatest happiness. All it takes is one person who sees our worth when we've forgotten it ourselves.